Hello, this is Professor Keith Ross from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. This is another in a series of lectures for the courses that I'm teaching this semester. This lecture is going to be for my criminal investigation course, and we're going to do Chapter 11, which is Introduction to Special Investigations. I'm not going to list the learning objectives, and I'm not going to talk about the quote. So I'm skipping right to slide number 4. Law enforcement agencies voluntarily report the 8 major felonies to the FBI. So when a person makes a report, and it's a felonious report, we haven't really talked about those 8 majors yet. I will in a minute. Those reports are voluntarily given to the FBI, and what the FBI does is they do basically data collection. It's not as accurate as we would like it to be, and we're going to discuss that in a bit. The FBI, when they compile all this information from the various law enforcement agencies in the United States of America, what they come up with is called the UCR, or the Uniform Crime Report. So when you're thinking about the UCR, the Uniform Crime Report, think about that it is compiled by police from police. These are the statistics that jurisdictions use to determine if crime is going up, if crime is going down, and you can also judge specifically which crimes are going up and which crimes are down. This is not a mandatory thing that police departments voluntarily do this. And there is a question, should it be mandatory? That's something to actually consider. However, more likely than not, if a police department doesn't voluntarily transmit this information to the FBI, there is the possibility that either federal or state funds might be withheld if we're talking about a local agency. Now, are departments underreporting? Now, this has been a question with police for a very long time. There have been many allegations of something called cooking the books. Now, I'll get to this, I'll explain it again later, but let's just talk about something right now. Let's say I am holding this cup. Let's say this cup is worth $20. Someone punches me in my face and takes it from my hand. That is considered to be a robbery. The reason why it's a robbery is that robberies are larcenies. What is a larceny? The removal of property without permission or authority to do so. What bumps up a larceny to a robbery is either the use of force, in this case I got punched in the face, or the immediate threat of force. If someone pointed a gun to my head and said, "Give me that cup or I'm going to shoot you now," that is a robbery. However, if we wanted to be creative, because what happens is if you have a robbery report, there's going to be a lot of pressure to close it. There's going to be a lot of pressure from police executives and from governmental executives. No one wants to preside over a jurisdiction where crime is going up. Is it possible that instead of taking a report or classifying this report as a robbery, could we maybe downgrade both? So since this is worth $20, maybe we could consider it a petty larceny. Now let's talk about the punch in the face. Let's say the punch in the face gives me a black eye. That would be, at least in New York State, considered to be misdemeanor assault or assault in the 3rd degree. So instead of reporting just a robbery, now we have this petty larceny, a misdemeanor, this assault 3, a misdemeanor. There's less pressure to look into it, less pressure to close it. I'm not suggesting that all police departments do this and that all police departments do this all the time, but it is something that has happened and it is something that can happen. So changing the classifications, there are communities that underreport. very tight-knit communities, I'm thinking like Asian communities, maybe Hasidic communities in New York City, fail to report because they fail to report crimes as they happen because they're insular communities that really don't want much police intervention or governmental intervention. Refusing to take the complaint. Maybe a police officer says this is nonsense. Here is a question. Let's say a police officer is approached by a person that he knows in the past is a prostitute, and the prostitute says she was raped. Does the police officer take that report? Well, obviously, because rape is what? A sexual assault without consent. But maybe the police officer says, well, listen, the sex industry is your business. So I guess this was a hazardous condition, but not a rape. I'm not suggesting that police officers do that, but this is a really example to the nth degree. Or talking victims out of making the complaint. Listen, I'll take the piece of paperwork for you, but nothing's going to happen. Why even bother? The 8 major felonies. Now, these are the felonies that are compiled for the UCR, the Uniform Crime Report, and these are really the felonies that most people are interested in the police reporting on. So the 8 major felonies in order of severity are murder, and I would also include manslaughter with that. So either the intentional killing of a person or the reckless killing of a person. Rape. And when we're talking about rape, at least in New York State, we're also talking about something called criminal sexual act, which used to be known as sodomy. And that basically what that is oral sexual conduct, anal sexual conduct. Robbery, which I just explained. What is a robbery? A robbery is a larceny, the removal of property without permission or authority to do so, with either the use of force or the immediate threat of force. And notice that I keep on saying the immediate threat of force, because if I were to say, give me that cup or I'm going to punch your face next week, that is not an immediate threat of force. That is a future threat of force. So it would be classified a little bit differently. Felonious assault. In New York State, that would be assault in the second degree, assault in the first degree. Burglaries. Now, most people don't really understand what a burglary is. The way a burglary is defined in New York State, it is entering a building, 4 walls and a roof, without permission or authority to do so, with the intent to commit some other offense. Now, more often than not, when we think about burglaries, we think about someone breaking into a place to steal something. That's a burglary because they were trespassing without permission or authority to do so in a building with what? The intent to commit some other crime. And all you have to show to charge burglary is the intent. Whether the actual act takes place doesn't really matter as far as charging the burglary. But let's say someone breaks into a commercial establishment, steals copper wire. That is a burglary. And there are other charges that would be affected to that as well. Probably criminal mischief because they broke a door handle, criminal possession of stolen property, things of that nature. Grand larcenies. Grand larcenies are felonies, and again, that's the removal of property without permission or authority to do so. And I think there's about 12 or 13 ways to commit a grand larceny in New York State. Grand larceny of an automobile. And then the last one is arson. Arson's really easy. Arson, when you think arson, think fire. So an easy way to sort of think about the 8 major felonies is Mr. Rab steals cars on fire. So Mr., we have the murder, manslaughter, the R, the rape. Then we have Rab, R-A-B. We have robbery. The A is assault, and it's only felonious assault, not misdemeanor assault. The B, which is burglary. Steals, that's your grand larcenies. Cars, that's your grand larceny of an automobile. On fire, and that's your arson. So crimes against people, murder. Murder is what? The intentional killing of a person. Manslaughter is either recklessly committing this homicide, recklessly killing a person, or there are some other factors involved in the manslaughter statute in New York State, like crimes of passion, abortions after a certain period of time, things of that nature. Rape, basically rape and criminal sex act, it's basically the same thing, it's just a different conduct. Rape, at least in New York State, is defined as uh, male to female or penis to vaginal insertion without consent. Criminal Sex Act talks about oral sexual conduct and or anal sexual conduct, but they hold the same exact punishments. They're the same class felony. Robbery, as I've already explained, is a larceny with the use of force or the immediate threat of force, and a felonious assault. A felonious assault basically probably breaking a bone or using a weapon to commit some sort of injury. Crimes against property, burglaries, ready to define that as well. You could remember that as burglaries are, here's the acronym, BIKE. Now, it's a weird acronym because it doesn't start in the beginning, it starts in the middle. So, BIKE, B I K E, you start with the K. The K, you knowingly enter a building with the intent to commit some other crime. Grand larceny autos, basically stealing something. Again, I'm not going to go in this lecture, I'm not going to really talk too much about how to commit a grand larceny. In a later lecture, I will. And arson. Preliminary investigations, quality preliminary investigation by patrol officers is the key to solving any crime. And this is a concept we've talked about already in a few of the past lectures. Securing the crime scene, making sure the crime scene is as big as it needs to be. And if, when in doubt, always go big. Identifying and detaining eyewitnesses or ear witnesses. Now, be careful with this idea of detaining a witness. You're detaining a witness because you want an investigator to talk to them, but this person is not in custody. You didn't do anything wrong by witnessing something. Avoid interview contamination. So if you have 2 or 3 witnesses, what do we not want to do? We don't want them commiserating with each other. We don't want them talking to each other. What do we want? We want to separate them. Taking correct and accurate information as best as possible, asking and answering out all of those NIATWI questions, and filing the report in a timely manner. Now, the way detectives, quote unquote, catch cases or get cases assigned to them, and what we're talking about is like a typical precinct squad detective, let's say a detective that works in the 105th precinct. They are general detectives, so they are adept at investigating different types of offenses. They don't really specialize. So there is a catching order. So let's say we have 3 detectives working today. 3 cases come in. Let's say one is a domestic violence assault, one is a robbery, and one is a burglary. Detective number 1 will catch the DV assault case. Detective number 2 will catch the second case. Detective number 3 catches the third case. Let's say a 4th case comes in, and let's say it's a sexual assault. Now detective number 1 is in order to catch that next case. The assumption is each detective is a generalist, meaning that they are adept at being able to investigate various types of offenses. And so there's no distinction between the severity of the crime and who catches it. It could be the luck of the draw, and maybe one detective has 4 murder investigations while another one has, let's say, grand larceny investigations. One detective, like I just said, could catch several heavy cases in this rotation method. This idea of patterns. A pattern is 2 or more cases with similarities of motive, similarities of the way the offense took place, or the same person is wanted for the same type of crime. So if we have a precinct pattern, that means that there are 2 of the same type of offense being committed in a precinct. You can have a borough-wide pattern, which means it's in the borough, or citywide, where it happens all across the city. For instance, the last time that we had a citywide murder pattern was the Son of Sam in the 1970s. Several cases get to be combined into one pattern, and one detective will be in charge of the pattern, or one team of detectives, depending on the severity of the case and how long the case goes. Case clearances. The 8 major felonies can be disposed of for classification purposes in the following 4 real ways. They will remain open pending further investigation. Some sort of exceptional clearance, we'll discuss that, closed by an arrest, or all leads were exhausted and then it gets transferred to somewhere else, in this case, the cold case squad. If it remains open, homicides, rapes, and pattern cases will remain open pending further investigation. Um, Unless we arrest the person, then we can close out that pattern. Or let's say we're talking about a sexual assault case and all we have is, let's say, a sperm sample, but we don't have a person. What we do have, though, is a DNA profile. Maybe we haven't been able to match up that DNA profile in the CODIS system, so that case remains open pending maybe this person gets arrested for something else, gets swabbed out, his or her DNA profile gets put into CODIS system, and now we have that match. Or a dying declaration, meaning that the perpetrator was never caught and on his or her deathbed says, yes, I'm the one that did it. Exceptional clearances. Police have probable cause to make an arrest, but cannot for something out of their control. Usually, what this means is one of 2 things. Either the suspect is dead, or the suspect is out of the country and we can't extradite. You can also close out a case via an arrest. Arrests are what? Based on probable cause. The individual is taken into custody to answer out the alleged offense, or all leads exhausted. The investigator has run out of viable leads. The case suffers a fatal blow. Victim can't pick the suspect out of either a photo array and or a lineup. Loss of destruction of evidence, lack of cooperation, or the victim dies. That case will remain open and then it'll eventually be transferred to the cold case. The last thing that we're going to talk about is this idea of CompStat. CompStat is an acronym for computer statistics. This was implemented in New York City in the 1990s, and basically what it is, it's a method of accountability for police commanders. So we're talking about the person that heads the precinct and or detective commanders, the person that heads up the precinct detective squad, to stay on top of what's happening in their areas. So basically what this does is it compiles information from the reports taken in, and it'll generate how many reports are open, have they been closed via arrest, are they patterns, is one area of the precinct experiencing more crime, a hotspot, or is it experiencing more crime at a certain time, a hot time? The 4 core principles are timely and actionable intelligence. So taking this data and forming intelligence from it, because I could take 4 police reports for a robbery, but what the computer will do is sort of match it up. Are these 4 robberies taking place in different spots in the precinct, or are they concentrated in one precinct, in one part of the precinct? And that's important because if they're concentrated in one part of the precinct, well, we're going to hold the precinct commander accountable, the either captain or usually a deputy inspector or maybe even an inspector, and make them reallocate resources, meaning put more manpower to the place that needs it. Gives effective tactics, rapid deployment of resources, and there is relentless follow-up. If you get called out to the carpet at CompStat, let's say in October 2020, for robberies that are taking place in your precinct as the commander of that precinct, well, in November 2020, you're going to have to answer out to that. This was a pretty quick lesson, and probably from now on, These lessons are going to be fairly quick because there's going to be a lot of repetition. And probably what I will start doing is combining a couple of these lessons together. So that's going to be it for this one. I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.